Hey guys, good afternoon everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm Jonathan Barsaid and I am president of the America-Israel Friendship League. And I'd like to thank everybody here for joining us today for this Labor Day weekend with a special sports event. As we start, I would like to ask you all to write in the chat window where you're joining us from. We and you always enjoy seeing the different locations from where people are sort of joining our webinars. And by way of just a housekeeping, for your own information, we will be posting a recording of the session for your continued enjoyment and of course for sharing with others. And also if you have a question throughout the session, please write them in the chat or in the Q&A. Time permitting, we will be presenting these up to the panel to be addressed. Over the course of the last 40 years, basketball has really assumed a tremendous place in Israel society. 44 years ago, actually, I was a scrawny little teenager playing basketball on the school team and in Maccabi, and I spent my summer as the vice president of EuroLeague Youth City. And as one of my responsibilities, I had to put together different sports-related presentations. In a very typical 70s Israeli youth naivete, I took my bike, rode down to South Tel Aviv to Tal Brody sports store, and I'm waiting there in the sideline, and then got his attention during a 2-minute break in between him dealing with paying customers, and just outright asked him if he and Mickey would join us for one of these presentations. He and Mickey Belkovich didn't think twice, didn't send me to their agent, and they said yeah. And that's Tal, basically, unassuming, approachable, and in this way introduced Israel to what was going to become professional, top-tiered European basketball over the years. Needless to say, by the way, that my interview did bring them luck. That was the year that they beat CSKA and also won the European Cup the first time. So, hopefully, our conversation today will bring some more luck to Maccabi Tel Aviv this coming year. Anyway, we have today with us many faces of this unique Israeli basketball connection. And to bring these stories to you, I'd like to introduce you to Rabbi Jeremy Fine, also known as the Great Rabbino. Jeremy has 3 passions in life: Judaism, sports, and bringing these two together. He writes, blogs, interviews, and is partnered with us on our sports webinar events for this purpose. Jeremy, the floor, or actually more accurately in this situation, the screen is all yours.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that. I have another passion in life, and it's my family. I don't want to ignore them at all, especially my 2 little daughters. Thanks. It's such a great honor to partner again with the America-Israel Friendship League and for this sports series. And this one is really touches my heart a lot because basketball was always my sport, and I'm getting to sit here with some of my favorite players of all time. Iconic players from the University of Illinois, Maryland, where my brother-in-law went. I'm going to do a few introductions. We're hoping to have maybe one more person pop on, but I want to start, when we talk about Israeli basketball, you have to start with Tal Brody. So Tal Brody grew up in New Jersey, went to the University of Illinois, drafted 12th in 1965, and in 1977, helped Israel and Maccabi Tel Aviv capture the European Championship. It was a historic and iconic moment in Jewish sports history. And on that team joined him Aulcie Perry, also from New Jersey. Did you guys know each other growing up?
No, we didn't.
No, all right. And Aulcie also played in the ABA, and he's going to share his stories as well. Liron Fannin was the assistant general manager at Maccabi Tel Aviv. By the way, I know we've mentioned this a lot. There are other teams in Israel besides Maccabi Tel Aviv, and maybe we'll get into that. And is currently the director of player development for the Canton Charge, the G League affiliate for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And finally, but definitely not last, but definitely not least, Shea Deron, 2007, graduated from the University of Maryland, where most people know her from, at least in America, because she was first team All-ACC, 16th pick in the WNBA draft, but ended up playing in Israel, and I believe drafted by the New York Liberty, correct? All right, that's why you didn't play, right? Because it was the Liberty?
I played a little bit. We'll go into why. Liron also, she knows from her end.
So we're going to start this panel because all of you come to Israeli basketball in a very different way. some of you grew up in Israel, some of you now make Israel your home, and some of you are in America. And but you know, their story begins. Your basketball story begins in Israel. So let's talk about why basketball in Israel is so influential, and what did it have to do sort of with your development as a player? And Tal, let's start with you. As you know, we mentioned before, you can't mention Israeli basketball without mentioning Tal Brody.
Well, you said Israeli basketball is very influential. Well, when I came to Israel after the Maccabi USA asked me to join the team for the 7th Maccabi games in 1965, and I did decide to take up that challenge. I didn't realize, you know, how not influential Israeli basketball is. All the games were outdoors. You would play up in a kibbutz, maybe in a sandstorm. You would play games maybe up in Haifa and then have to come back to Tel Aviv because you got rained out in the middle of the game. There wasn't any indoor courts, only one maybe, Naaman, or I think in Hulon they had a roof, some sort of roof on top of the game, but it was open. In Jerusalem, you played out in the cold. You had games, Aulcie can tell you, when he came, also he was very surprised that we had to play in the middle of a cow pasture in a kibbutz, Gan Shmuel. Run with all the cow manure around the air over there. But for me, it was a challenge. You know, it's 10 years, we're all the time waiting for a center like Aulcie Perry to come to join us, which we're missing. But it was a challenge because Israel at that time never got past the first round of the European Cup of Cups or the European Championships. And when a fella called Noah Klieger, the president of Maccabi at that time, that was a Holocaust victim, and when I saw on his arm, when he asked me after the Maccabi games that if, you know, let's say like a player of that your stature would come to Israel for 1 year, you can take us maybe to a different level. And he said the country is going through a very serious recession. People aren't smiling. Boycotts, Arabic boycotts all around us. And maybe you can make a difference, and this could bring a new spirit to the country. And that's basically why, because the NBA at that time, the Washington Wizards were the Baltimore Bullets. And today, if you're 12th in the draft, you're signing for about 12 or $3-4 million a year for 2 years, maybe no cut. You'll open up maybe up to $8 million your third or fourth year. But at that time, the guys that were together on the college all-star team and by Sporting News selected as the 10 best college ball players coming out of the university that year. Rick Barry, Billy Cunningham, Gail Goodrich, Jerry Sloan that just passed away recently, Bill Bradley. It was a different period because the NBA at that time, the salaries for the guys coming out of college were about $12,500 a year. So even if you multiply the interest and the inflation, you're not going to get to $4 million a year. So financial wasn't any type of in my decision. And the challenge of going to Israel and remembering that fella with the numbers on his Noah Klieger with the numbers on his hand, saying, take a year out of my life. It reminded me growing up in the States in the 60s in high school, and then, you know, early 70s, that all the movies we would see in the theater, what happened to the Jews during the Nazis in Germany, in the concentration camps. And I felt, you know, at that period of time as a youth, what could I do? And here, all of a sudden, this fella's asking me come for 1 year, take 1 year out of my life and make a difference. And putting together that my father from 1921 to 1923, came to Israel from Russia, Poland. And my grandfather lived in Israel 10 years, from 1921 to 31. And they were on the crew that built the first electric station in Israel in Naharaim, Rothenburg electric station, and the first airport in Herzliya. So putting my father's experience and putting that challenge together, it was something that I couldn't say no to. And that's when I told Abe Poland, who was the Jewish owner of the Bullets at that time, and I told him, look, I have a nice challenge in Israel. I thought at that time Baltimore had two good small guards, Johnny Egan and Wally Jones. They had two good shooting guards, Don Ole and Kevin Lagerty. They had Jerry Sloan. Yeah, Jerry Sloan was coming out of college. He was coming in at 6'5". So I thought, putting all this together, I thought that taking 1 year out and seeing what happens in Baltimore, I wanted to trade me to Philadelphia. Dolph Shays was coaching at that time, and he was looking for guards. And I had a real good opportunity with them. But again, I didn't think it was a big loss taking a year out of my life. Bill Bradley went to play in Simmenthal in Europe. That opened up my eyes that maybe Europe is really something challenging. He was a Rhodes Scholar in Oxford. Billy Cunningham and Rick Barry, they went to play in the ABA, which Dr. J joined them a little bit after. The NBA in '65 wasn't the NBA created by David Stern, bringing in the television, so it was a different story.
Tal, I want to, you said you brought in Aulcie. Aulcie, what was that like? The team brought in Aulcie to be that center. What was that experience for like? So for Tal, he has this background with sort of his family in Israel and Judaism. Aulcie, what about you? When did you decide to come over to Israel, and why did you make that decision?
For me, it was about a job. I had 2 years trying to make it in the ABA and the NBA, and both 2 years, each year I got inside and got smashed in the face. So I said, oh, look, Aulcie, go to Europe where you can practice every day, competition every day, work on your game, and then come back and try the NBA or the ABA. But it was September, and my agent still hadn't found me a job. I was playing in the summer tournament in New York, the biggest tournament for professionals, the Rucker tournament. And after the game, we were playing in Madison Square Garden for the championship. And after the game in September, Shamluk, the mythical manager for Maccabi Tel Aviv, he walks in, he said, my name is Shamluk, and I'm from Israel, and I'm looking for a player. He could have said Siberia. I was ready to go. I was ready to sign. All my life, that's my dream. All my life, since I'm 13 years old. I've been working since I'm 13 years old to be a professional player, because I was blessed at 13 and a half years old to be 2 meters. So from that day, I started to work before school, after school, in the rain, in the snow. It didn't matter. I wanted to be a professional player.
So, Liron, I want to throw this to you because there's talking about Maccabi Tel Aviv and the efforts they made. Obviously, you, for those that maybe you could share a little bit, sort of grew up with the team and then became the assistant general manager. So tell us what it was like, growing up, watching sort of the rise of Maccabi Tel Aviv.
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, I grew up in Maccabi because Aulcie mentioned Shamluk, and when Shamluk retired, my dad became the team manager and GM and so on, and then a part owner. But I grew up, I remember growing up, everything was very, very innocent in sports and basketball, and players really played for the love of the game and for the pride of the team. It obviously, now we're talking these days about, money and how the NBA looks, and it's a total different thing. But then you played for the pride of the country, for the pride of the club you were playing in. It was completely different. And when we're talking now with Tal and Aulcie, who are 2 basketball legends, And I don't think if you ask them at any point on how much they made each year, they really cared, because once they set foot in Israel and saw the love of the fans and the passion and the atmosphere in the games, that it was like no other. And I think, you know, Maccabi always played in Europe, in all the European competitions, and were very successful. And by that success, it brought a lot of pride to the country of Israel, and it elevated the sports in Israel, because everyone wanted to be like, you know, like the players and like the team, and everyone wanted to be the same. So I think, you know, Maccabi is probably the biggest symbol of sports in Israel. But also it was kind of the team that opened doors for us worldwide on other matters as well, and not only in sports. And that's what I saw growing up, and being around obviously the players and the system, and seeing how Americans coming in had all this adjustment, but also from the minute they set foot in Israel, it was very easy for them to get situated, and by the love of the fans and by the love of the people that were around them and took care of them. And that was the biggest success of Israeli basketball, I think.
So let's hand this over to Shai for a moment. So you went the reverse of Tal, growing up in Israel and then coming to the United States and playing at a major school, especially at that time. Maryland was known nationally as one of the powerhouses, both men and women. And so what was that decision like to come here? And what was the competition like over in Israel that sort of made you come for college, but then decide to come back to Israel to play professionally, just with a brief stint in America? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I started just like Aulcie, like around 12. I was actually a tennis player, and Galit, my coach here in Israel, she saw me play at the country club, like pickup, and she like grabbed me in the middle of the game. She's like, "You're gonna play on my team." And I was like, "All right, whatever," you know. And so that's basically how I shifted from tennis to basketball. It was as simple as that. I think looking back today, I realized I'm much more of a team player than a one-on-one type of tennis player. So it fit me really well. And at some point, I think I felt like I hit a glass ceiling here in Israel in terms of the competition. I was playing already with, you know, people as old as 30, 35. I signed my first professional contract at the age of 13 in Ramat Sharon, which was a huge powerhouse here in Israel. And so, you know, we felt like if I wanted to achieve my dream of playing in the WNBA, being the first Israeli to play in the WNBA, I needed the WNBA to see me play, and they weren't seeing me play in Israel. So the combination of that made my family just literally pick up and move just for me, for my basketball dreams. If I had to pinpoint the hardest 2 years of my life, it was that. I went to Christ the King, a very Jewish school. Obviously, I was the only Jewish girl there, and you know, I felt different. The atmosphere was different. At Christ the King, it was probably the most competitive. We had 7 D1 players. My senior year was 7 D1 players go to the best colleges. So it was a very, very competitive atmosphere. And actually, I want to tweak what you said, because actually Maryland was 6 or 7 out of 8 teams in the ACC. They were very, very bad. The year before I got there. And, you know, I had my choice of colleges, and I kind of wanted to take my own path. And I felt like Brenda Fries felt the same way with her energy, and felt like we could do something completely different and take Maryland from, you know, a bad team to one of the best teams and create a powerhouse. Felt like that was a little bit more, I guess, fit my DNA more. And so, you know, when I told my coach in high school, said, you know, I'm going to sign at Maryland, because it was down to Maryland, Duke, or Harvard. And, you know, he told me, he's like, "Oh, get ready to lose a lot." And I was like, man, where's the faith? Where's the faith? Come on. And yeah, you know, we built the pieces, you know, Brenda and the amazing coaches. And we had some of the best players today, Crystal Langhorne, Christy Tolliver, who's, a WNBA champ. Crystal Langhorne is a WNBA champ. And there's a long list of girls who really created this Maryland powerhouse that we know today, and the championship that we took in 2006, which really kind of put everything together for us, that we had done something that no one else did, and that was bring the first championship to the University of Maryland. So that was kind of the thought process going through, why leaving Israel. And at the end of the day, I wanted to play in the WNBA. That was my dream, and I wanted to lead a good college and to get seen, and that's basically what was my number one priority. How do I make this dream come true?
Right. So, Liron, I want to go back to you, although probably all of you could answer this, but I think as someone who's been a part of the organization, describe a little bit about men's and women's basketball today in Israel, maybe where the stadiums are and how that works, and then also what are what's the atmosphere like? So as someone who's been to an NBA game, a WNBA game, and Maccabi Tel Aviv game, none of them are alike. They're totally different experiences, except that they have a basketball and two hoops. But besides that, they feel very, very different. So Liron, maybe touch a little bit about the modern game of basketball in Israel.
Well, I think, first of all, Israel has become one of the most strongest leagues to play in Europe. If we're talking about Spain, Italy, now Australia, as great leagues for Americans to go and play and be watched by NBA teams as well. So Israel is right there with them. The league is strong and competitive. The teams are very professional. We are one of the only leagues in the world that pays on time for players. You hardly, and I'm saying that because, every few years the economy in the world, fluctuates, and it's very tough for teams sometimes to survive and to pay players on time. And that's a big thing. When players come to Israel, they know that they might not get the highest salaries in Europe, but they get their money on time. And that's very, very important. And that's important for the agent to know, and that's important for the player to know. So the league is becoming very strong and competitive. You see a lot of big names coming out of the NBA. Example, Amara Stoudemire played in Israel a few years now. And it's very, very interesting. And you see also the NBA following, all the scouts are following the talent in Israel. You see names now that are coming up, Israeli kids growing up and becoming like real names in the scouting books. And also, I think that the Israeli basketball is great for college players to come out as well, because some of them you see that come to Israel and then go to the NBA. So that works both ways. I think part of it is the atmosphere, as you mentioned, in the arenas. We have great arenas, and even the small teams in the Israeli league gets a lot of fans each week. So when you walk into the arena, it's very warm atmosphere. The fans are very passionate. It's kind of like, I would say, the playoffs game in the NBA. So it's very, very different. I think Thursday nights, EuroLeague games, probably the best atmosphere that you can experience in a sports game when the arena is full every week. I think maybe Belgrade and Greece is something that would be similar to what's going on in Tel Aviv on Thursday nights, and Aulcie and Tal can attest to that. So yeah, it's very, very different. I think in the States, sometimes when you come to a game, which is not a playoff game, sometimes it's more calm, and you don't feel all the passion that you feel. The Israeli fans are very, very passionate about their teams, and they come to work. They're the sixth player.
Mm-hmm.
Number one fans.
Yeah.
They're the number one fans in all of Europe.
For sure. I want to thank Linda for that question. And I want also, let's stay with you. So, a lot of people think the second you go to Israel, it's like only for Jewish players, right? Which we know is not true. Anthony Parker, is a historic player, played in Israel and then came back over to the to the NBA and speaks a lot about that. And I know his sister Candace, probably even better than him, but never played in Israel. Although we should probably get her. That would be a huge snag.
Yeah, that would be great.
Aulcie, what was that experience like for you? I mean, did you feel that at all, the religious piece or not? And sort of, did you feel at home when you got there? And how did people make you feel at home?
I'm going to start it like this. There's no other team in the world that I could have went to and received what I received in Maccabi. No team in the world. To win championships. The first year, they hired me for 6 games. They told me, look, we're playing 25 years in the European Cup and we never made it out of the first round. And for sure, this year we're not going to make it because only one team can go up, and the team that won the European Cup is in our bracket and only one team can go up. So for sure, after 6 games, you're going to be going home or another team will see you. So we went up. We beat the Russians, which the NBA is still discussing how did that happen, because they were the #1 team in the world at that time. And then a month and a half later, with Tal's leadership, we won the European Championship. And that, for me, was a dream that I could never even imagine. From that point on, my whole life changed. That's it.
So you felt comfortable right away, and I think that's part of the reason so many of these NBA quality players, WNBA quality players, every time you speak with them, they say, we arrive, we're treated with such love and affection, then they take us to the beach and we eat the best food in the world, and then we get to play basketball in front of the best fans in the world. What's the problem? Why would we not?
And two, in all the major cities in Israel, everybody speaks English. It's not like going to Spain and Italy, somewhere like that, where you have to speak Spanish or Italian. In Israel, you can get by with just English. So that's another thing. And the weather, and like you said, amazing food. What else can you ask for? Good competition, amazing food, amazing weather, nice people. What else? I can never live in America again after this experience. I'm telling you, after this experience, I can only go visit my family.
I love it. So I want to give shout outs to people in Weston, Florida, Gainesville, Providence, Tallahassee, and Jerusalem, all watching us. Tal, let's talk about sort of continue on the theme of modern Israeli basketball. And we're starting to see some players move from Israeli basketball into the NBA. We obviously saw that with Omri. Lior Eliyahu was drafted but never played. Then we saw Omri Cosby have a very successful 10-year career. We saw Gal Mekel have a brief career but did play. And now we're about to see Denny, and I'm never going to pronounce his last name right, and nor have I heard anyone. But also there's others. Yoel Zusman is rumored to maybe be able to have a chance. Sean Dawson has had a few opportunities and come very, very close to playing in the NBA. And I'm watching a kid, Yam Madar, also just looks like he has NBA caliber. So what are we doing now in Israel to develop? How has the game developed to produce NBA quality players?
Well, as Liron said, the main drive behind this whole basketball program has been the relation, how the country has taken on towards basketball. We became, as they said, a team that never went past the first round to a team that already won 6 times the European Basketball Championship. And about 10 years ago, I was invited to James Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame to cut the ribbon of the first team outside of the United States that was honored and given an exhibition in Springfield, Massachusetts, the James Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Now that excitement you saw in Minnesota when you saw the On the Map movie that's going all over the world. And now you can see the movie that's right after that is the same excitement about Aulcie Perry's life, which is started in the film festivals right before the coronavirus basically canceled a lot of the film festivals. So that's where you can understand because many people from the Jewish community have been to Israel. They never seen this part of Israel. And you see it in Aulcie's movie, and you see it in the On the Map movie, how that spirit has taken on the state of Israel. Now, what has happened all through the country, wherever you go, it looks like Indiana, where you have basketball courts all over the place. But as the game has progressed, you have beautiful gymnasiums in cities. In Jerusalem, 11,000 seat stadium. In Tel Aviv, 11,000 seat stadium. In Haifa, I think it's about 5,000 or 6,000. And all the other cities around, you have from 3,000 to 5,000 fans in a most popular league, where today you don't know if the last place team, Galil Elyon, has beaten Maccabi twice in this regular season. And so from Eilat until the Galil Elyon in the north, near the Lebanese border, we have basketball that keeps the people exciting and gives them where to go and watch the game and cheer for their game. So basketball schools, bitty basketball schools, are all over the country. Practically every city has a bitty basketball program. And because of the success of basketball, it's spread out to other sports. I mean, we have judo. Our girls in judo have won 3 times world championships. And a miracle happened in Abu Dhabi. Now we have a normalization agreement on the making with Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and the United Arab Emirates. But who would think that in Abu Dhabi, Moki Sagi in our judo would take the world championship, and the Hatikva is playing as he goes up to the podium. Who would think that something like that could happen in a Muslim country? So because of the basketball, it brought in all the excitement. Now, Shai can tell you about what's happened with women's basketball. I mean, we don't have the Aulcie Perry in our women, 6'10", you know, that can rebound, shoot, drive, go to the basket, throw the ball out to fast breaks, and block shots under the basket. If the women's basketball recruits a good center, or a few good centers that big, we could probably be one of the best teams also in women's basketball in Europe. I remember a teammate of Shai, Nama Shafir. I was in a hotel in New York. I pick up the New York Times. It says this religious Israeli girl that played with Toledo, because it was Shabbat, she walked to Madison Square Garden because of Shabbat. When Shabbat finished, she joined the team. They beat a team from California. She scored 40 points, and I think was the MVP of the game. And so basketball has spread out in all levels in Israel. And I think Shai can tell you more about how exciting. I think the girls' defense is even tougher than the men's defense in Israel. You know, and I enjoy seeing the women's basketball. I go see Shai when with her team play, and it's exciting. So sport in general, basketball is very exciting to the public in Israel, and that's what has pushed the sport and pushed the municipalities and the cities to build indoor gymnasiums, which have really contributed to the quality of basketball. Danny Ovadia, Ovdija, whatever everybody decides how they're going to call him in the States. Liron could probably tell you what's going to be his name in the NBA, but he'll probably go 4 to 10 in the NBA. And that's a big honor for Israel. The same with Liron representative Omri Caspi. To think that you would have an Israeli basketball player 10 years in the NBA, it's amazing. It's amazing. So for me, it's been a tremendous ride seeing this from a team that played outdoor basketball and to a team that is honored in the James Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame and 6 times won the European Basketball Championship. Aulcie was on twice, not only the team that I was with in '77, but also in '81, you know, in Strasbourg. where we won for the second time. Then 2001 in Paris, 2004 in Tel Aviv, 2005 in Moscow. And then with David Blatt coaching the team, where our team, Maccabi Tel Aviv, lost 7 times in the Israeli league. In Milano, Italy, 10,000 Israelis, can you believe 10,000 Israelis came to support our team in Milano, Italy? And it was an amazing. We beat the Russian team by 15. Oh, wait a minute, we beat the Russian team. I think it was in overtime by 1 point after being down by 15. But 15, Real Madrid, which is one of the best teams in Europe, we wound up beating them by 12 in the finals. Real Madrid, which is the most classiest club in Europe. And so it's been great for me. It's been great for Aulcie to see this basketball, how it rose and what it meant to the Jewish communities in Europe, in East Europe at the time behind the Iron Curtain, and in West Europe, where anti-Semitism today in Germany and France and Belgium and different countries, not any less than it was at that time. But for us to see how important it was when a team like Maccabi Tel Aviv would come to Europe, East or West, and to be able to play on the same courts. And also, I'm just finishing that in the last 20 years, who would think that an Israeli team could be on the same floor with the Cleveland Cavaliers against when LeBron James came back, when Magic Johnson played with the Los Angeles Lakers, and thanks to Isaiah Thomas when he was coaching the New York Knicks, he gave us, after 15 years, we're trying to get the game against the Knicks. But in the press conference, I told him, don't be surprised if nobody's cheering for the Knicks. And that's the way it was. We had 18,600 in Madison Square Garden cheering for Maccabi Tel Aviv. Now, this is how the evolution of basketball is, and how the people have been the driving factor of keeping basketball as one of the top sports as far as achievements has been throughout, as far as a team sport.
Yeah, so sports, obviously, and this is what these sessions are about, is growing. And Shai, I want to come to you about the WNBA. I want to make note, though, that today the first Israeli descent player will pitch in the major leagues today. Coincidentally, against the New York Yankees. I don't think that was done purposely, but maybe for ratings, it's possible. And Dean Kremer is going to be on Team Israel Baseball. So we're watching sort of a rise in a variety of different sports. But Shai, we saw you many years ago get drafted to the WNBA, and I believe, if I'm correct, you're the last Israeli to be drafted in the WNBA. So if we're watching some of these NBA quality players on the rise on the men's side, is there a reason we're not seeing it as much on the women's side? Naama Shafir is a phenomenal college player, but I don't believe anyone thought she was going to play at the next level in America. But in Israel, and we're watching WNBA players, as we talked about, Alicia Clark come over. She's a major name that comes over and plays in Israel. So where are the development of the women's game, and is there a reason for that?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's a reason. I'll tell you what I think what's happening. I think it's a couple of things. First of all, I think the women's game, like Tal said, it's really, really evolved. So I think it's become a lot more athletic, a lot more one-on-one. I think the size of the players has really increased. So point guards are now 6'1", and post players are now 6'7" and very mobile and dunking. And this is kind of the level where it's at. And something with the water in Israel is causing us to stay short and compete a little less in terms of, the physical aspect of the new type of women's game. I think that's really the biggest influence right now. Is I think they're targeting the professional women's basketball here in the wrong way, because they basically open an academy and they're like, let's bring the basketball players. No, I'm saying let's find the most athletic players. Let's steal them from, just like I got stolen from tennis. Let's steal them from volleyball. Let's this 6'4", really athletic, really strong girl that doesn't know how to shoot a basketball, but let's teach her those skills. There's some things you can't teach. You can't teach someone to be 6'4". You can't teach someone to be athletic. And so, I think it has to do with targeting the right type of basically this mold and turn them into these basketball players that will fit today's game. And so I think that's really the combination that we're not seeing right now. We're seeing, kind of like complacency where whoever wants to play basketball will play basketball. Whoever wants to play volleyball, no. The basketball has to be a lot more aggressive and find these diamond in the roughs and then turn them into basketball players. And I think they're in the right track. They're starting to do these projects, but it has to be done a lot more, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we're seeing plenty of American players, not just Jewish American players, either who played in Maccabi. I think Israel's doing a good job of getting some of these players. Annette Snow is a name, very successful college career, played Maccabi basketball, and has found a lot of success in Israel and others. So a lot of people have been asking, and Neil pointed out, Americans want to be involved in watching Israeli basketball. We've already talked about the excitement, and we obviously can't replicate the actual game, although it's not just Maccabi Tel Aviv who comes over. Maccabi Haifa comes over. They played the Timberwolves. I know they played the Warriors. I don't know if Hapoel Yerushalayim has come over, but this is part of the new sort of wave of bringing attention to Israeli basketball, is playing an exhibition game against a U.S. team. So where are any of these games broadcasted? What ways can American fans get involved in Israeli basketball? I'm going to open that up to any of you who might have some recommendations for people who are interested in that.
Well, I think today, with everything, social media, YouTube, internet as a whole, you can watch games. There's the Israeli League. You go on a website and you subscribe and you can watch all the games. We just did, and I know all the NBA teams did when they had the little bubble coming back from Corona. So you can basically today watch any league you want to watch, and especially Israeli League, you can watch everywhere. It's very, very easy to get access to that. So I think the game itself became very, very global. And Tal knows it best. The relationships we have today with the NBA, the Israeli League has strong relationships with the NBA, and that's why you see Maccabi Tel Aviv, or you see Haifa, or eventually, hopefully, Jerusalem as well, because they have a great arena, so they can invite an NBA team to play there. But I think today the game has become so global, and you see so many European players in the NBA, and that puts a spotlight on the different leagues in the world. Now, you were talking about Omri, Caspi, and Gal Mecca, and hopefully the next Israeli that we will have in the NBA. When they went to the NBA, and also Coach Blatt, that pushed Israeli basketball really forward. I could see the difference and the change and the amount of kids that went on to play basketball. And Shay as well, when she went to the WNBA, what they do is just give kids an ability to dream. When you see Shay in the WNBA, and you see Omri and Gal in the NBA, and you see Coach Black coaching in the NBA, that tells the kids you're allowed to dream. And if you work hard enough, you can be the next one. And that's something we didn't have before. So yeah, the game is becoming global. Now you have social media and everything that puts, every player in every corner in the world on the spotlight if he's good enough. So the fact that kids can dream and can get to these achievements, that gave a huge push for Israeli basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen some guys who've really had, decently successful careers in the NBA, from Sonny Weems, who played a little bit. I loved what he was doing in Israel. I thought he was a star. I don't know why he left, but Roger Mason Jr. and Brandon Paul, and these are guys who are landing on teams who are being productive, and that causes a sort of a global reaction. More, if you're successful, people want to be a part of that success.
And they speak about Israel. That's it. Will Bynum, for instance.
Yeah.
They're good ambassadors. Very good ambassadors.
They are. And they talk about their experiences in Israel and the people. They talk about the people. And that's, I mean, of course, about the game, but what the impact of that the people gave them, the feeling. They call Israel their second home, and they call us their families. And that's, I think, the biggest thing.
Yeah. There's anyone else want to touch on that a little bit? Sort of.
Just to say, I'm 40 years here, and I've had many friends and many players that came through Israel. Not one of them ever told me that they did not want to play in Israel. Every friend that I had, every player that I know that came to Israel wanted to stay and play here. Everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really made it a specific target to make sure these, the American players not only had a good time here, but experience what Israel had to offer and show the real side of Israel. Because, like everyone said here, they, at the end of the day, are ambassadors. When they hear someone say something bad about Israel, like, look, I've been to Israel. That's not how it is. And that's the best way to kill all these negative thoughts is have people that have been there, done that, tell the story, not from our point of view, from their point of view, someone that's not connected to Israel in any way. And so that was every year. I made it, my mission in life to make sure that these Americans went home, loving Israel and talking about Israel to everyone in America that they knew, and just to make sure that they were our #1 ambassadors for our country.
Yeah, and Omri's been incredible. First of all, he's a huge mensch, but with his time and every Jewish community he touched when he played there, but also he's been taking these NBA trips with, I think DeMarcus Cousins has been to Israel a few times just because it's fun. And we've seen Bob Kraft do that with NFL players, but Omri, I remember watching this picture. A bunch of my students were from my synagogue were on a year course, a gap year. And they just happen to be at the Kotel, and there walks in like all these NBA stars, and they're sending me these pictures. I'm like, what is going on? I didn't know. So, Tal, you've been such an ambassador for Maccabi Tel Aviv, but also just Israel in general through the game of basketball. How important is Omri these trips, and what can we do maybe to connect that American-Israel friendship through the game of basketball and sports? And what efforts are there, and what can we do more of?
First of all, in Israel, we're very grateful to the American-Israel Friendship League that twice, Aulcie and I were on visits. We took a team from near the Lebanese border when during the Lebanese war, they couldn't practice basketball. And we took them to the States. We played against Martin Luther King schools. They had other games in New Jersey. And it was an unbelievable experience, not only for the kids that couldn't play basketball because of the Lebanese war, but, to play against American teams. And also in the South, near the Gaza Strip, during also one of the scrimmages that Israel had with Hamas, that they took a team to the United States. Now, as far as the U.S. teams coming here, twice I held, you mentioned Robert Kraft. I mean, for me, it was an unbelievable experience holding Jim Brown and Roger Staubach and Joe Montana when Roger Kraft brought twice the NFL Hall of Famers. And twice I hosted the NBA All-Star team. Aulcie and I were in Jerusalem. We had dinner with the guys there. They went around Israel. They were down in Sderot, which is receiving... I mean, I always hear in the middle of the night the red alarm that means in the south of Israel, Qassam rockets are coming in. And here, the NBA All-Stars went down to Sderot in one of the children's recreation center that has a roof that prevents rockets from coming in so the kids could play. And they played basketball and games, and it was unbelievable to see. Now, this is what's happening. The NBA itself has junior NBA games. In Israel, we took 30 bitty basketball teams. Each team had jerseys, shirt and shorts with one of the NBA teams. The NBA sent a delegation to Israel to run the tournament, and it was amazing to see. The NBA brought to Israel the best high school girls and guys basketball players. It was amazing to see guards 6'6". The level of the players that they brought for a training camp in Israel was
basketball
amazing.
without borders.
You know, this is all the time going on in Israel. The relationship since David Stern, God, I mean, he has helped our basketball. As I said, we couldn't never, Maccabi used to come in one time a year to promote our team against any NBA team that we're going to play, whether it's New York or Los Angeles, doesn't matter where. But it's continuing with Adam Silver. Now, as Laurent said, that in fact, we see each other practically every year at the NBA All-Star Weekend. All of a sudden, I see her with Sean James. That was a player with B'nai Herzliya, and he's in the international box when I saw Laurent. So you have so many players that played in Israel that have gone back to the States. As I said, like Brian Randall is with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Parker, he's with the Orlando Magic. And it's like, if anybody says anything against Israel, there's so many of these guys that love their experience in Israel that speak up for Israel. They're our best ambassadors. The guys that played in this country had a wonderful experience. As was said before, they might not have been paid like they can be paid in China or Europe today, but their life experience of being in Israel is something which is very unique. And when they go back to the United States, they feel it, and they would stand up for Israel wherever they are.
So let's talk about this year, and this will sort of be the last question, I think. What does Israeli basketball look like this year? Are we gonna have a men's season, a women's season? Are they practicing? Are they bubbling? Are they wobbling? What are they doing to?
Good question for Tal, but it looks very tough. Good question for Tal.
I
could tell you about the women's, about the guys are practicing, but they're more or less in quarantine. You know, they practice and go home. And but we don't know if the league is going to start because it's they might postpone it, and maybe because there's not going to be a crowd if they start the league on time in probably the 1st of October, and then the EuroLeague will be about the 16th of October. But if there's not going to be a crowd, and if the amount of infections in Spain and Italy, which are quite, and even in Israel, it's very high. Unfortunately, the first wave was good. The second wave has been terrible for Israel. But basically, 75% of the people recover. So again, because of the quarantine, and we don't really know what's going to be. Right now, it's not going to be any crowd. You know, the league is scheduled to start, but without a crowd. You know, and then if somebody gets infected, who knows? With one team, it's liable to just cancel the whole. Nobody knows. It's the same like in the NBA. You know, it's
a tough time now too, Tal. The holidays is coming up, and after the holidays, it's going to start to spread again. That's my feeling.
It's
we need to build a Disneyland so that they can have a bubble.
I think the big problem is, I mean, in the States, obviously we see a bubble, and we know that most of the money comes from TV. In Europe and in Israel, it's not like that. The fans and the ticket sales is a huge part of the budget. And that's why if you don't have the fans in the building, you're losing a huge part of the budget, and that's a big problem. So we don't know how teams can survive that.
So let's hope and pray, obviously, for the world that the virus goes away as quickly as possible, not just for basketball's sake, but for the health and for everyone. I want to thank Shai and Aulcie and Laurent and Tal for their time. It's an honor for me to be in the room with some of my favorites associated with the game of basketball in Israel and in America. And big thank to the America-Israel Friendship League for all they're doing and putting this together. I'm going to hand it back over to Jonathan, who's going to close us out. So Shana Tova U'Metuka to all of you.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Shai, you're in Israel?
I'm in Israel,
Shai?
yeah.
Okay. I'll find you.
Yep.
How you doing? Everything all right?
No complaints.
Okay, I'll find
Jeremy,
you. I'll give you a call.
Thank you very much. Aulcie, Tal, Shai, Deon, thank you very much. This has been great.
Thank you, Jonathan.
It's been, informative, educational, and really it's showing a part of Israel that does not really always come across, which is really the essence of what our webinar series is about. We hope you'll continue joining us we're doing these webinars, and as we indicated, twice a week. Please join us on our website. You'll be able to track coming up later on this week on Wednesday. We're going to have another one of our guided tours of Haifa this week, and so hopefully you'll be able to join us. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you for this session, and Shana Tova.
Okay, I want to personally
thank you.
Shana Tova. I want to personally thank you from Tal and myself. We had a lot of experience with the Israel Friendship League. Wonderful experience, really. Great job you guys do. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.